Good old Al Jolson. You ever heard of him? Don't worry, I don't blame you if you haven't. His legacy started well over 100 years ago. He was a singer, comedian, and actor in his time, in both theatre and film. By the 1920s, he was apparently America's most famous and highest paid entertainer. Those who don't know him are now probably thinking, how have I not heard about this guy? Well, you'll find out why eventually. I'll try and sum up his life. Al Jolson was born A.C. Jolson on the 9th of June 1886 in, I'm going to pronounce this terribly wrong, Seredzius Kovno Governorate of the Russian Empire, which is now Lithuania. His family moved to America in the 1890s to secure a better life. A year after moving, he was introduced to show business and became absolutely fascinated by it. By 1897, Jolson and his brother Hirsch began singing in the streets for coins. He also managed to support himself by singing in bars and saloons. By 1902, Jolson was performing from show to show in theatre, but popularity in stage performances were on the decline because of Nickelodeons that were showing short films, which were the next big thing at the time. However, in 1904, he decided to do something for a performance that was so beneficial that his popularity skyrocketed afterwards. Blackface. Yep. It made such a big impact on his career that he began wearing blackface from there on. Do you see now why you probably haven't heard of him? By 1910, he was performing in musicals. The one that propelled his Broadway career was The Whirl of Society. Two important things came out of this. The first one was a quote, "You ain't heard nothing yet." The second was his signature blackface character called Gus. Now I'll talk about Gus later on. His career was so big that his salary of $1,000 a week was doubled. Now I've done the calculations and $2,000 from 1914 inflation adjusted to 2020 would now be $51,983.60 a week. A week. That salary even went up to $15,000 a week, but I don't know when that was recorded exactly, so I can't get a proper exact inflation adjustment on that. By the mid to late 20s, Al Jolson was making his film debut, and it was massive. Not simply because it was Al Jolson, but it was also the first talkie film. That's right, The Jazz Singer.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you, you ain't heard nothing. You want to hear Toot Toot Tootsie? All right, hold on. Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye. Toot Toot Tootsie, don't cry.
It changed the film industry forever. And with the star power of Al Jolson and the innovation in sound, it became the highest grossing film of 1927. This was also where I first heard of Al Jolson. But it was also where I discovered what he was known for. I'll try and reenact my reaction to my discovery. So here I am, just watching The Jazz Singer, as you do. Oh, look at that black stuff he's putting on his face. I wonder what that's all about. Wow, he's putting a lot of it on, but he's avoiding the lips. I wonder why that's the... Wait a minute. No. Is he... What? Oh my goodness. Afterwards, I looked him up and discovered not only was he considered the King of Broadway, but he was also dubbed the King of Blackface Performers. What a title to have. Some time goes by and Jolson is still starring in films, even in new mediums such as radio and TV. He's still up to his old ways, even when the colour film arrived.
You Camptown ladies sing this song. Do-da, you Camptown racetrack 5 miles long. Oh, do-da,
but his career was on the decline because his acts began to get a bit repetitive, and eventually Hollywood just forgot about him, only getting minor roles. However, when World War II happened, Al Jolson was one of the first entertainers to perform for veterans overseas, and this was an entirely new generation listening in, and they loved him. By the end of the war, with the help of 2 biographical films made about him, where he briefly featured in one, Al Jolson was back at the top of the entertainment industry, even among a new generation of artists like Bing Crosby. At this point in this new peak in his career, Jolson was in his 60s. Then the Korean War happened, and again he performed for veterans over there. However, doctors recommended that Al should rest, but he ignored the advice and just performed anyway. Unfortunately, 3 weeks after his tour ended, on the 23rd of October 1950, Al Jolson suffered a heart attack and died at the age of 64. And his busy schedule was apparently a factor in that. This man pretty much dominated the first half of the 20th century, and I had no idea until about a year ago. So, you've heard this guy's story, and perhaps some of you with your 21st century mindsets are probably thinking, how did this guy get so big, despite what he was? How is this guy not, banned or maybe blacklisted or something like that? Well, I did some digging, and it was interesting what I found. Obviously, blackface wasn't as offensive back then, but it's more than that. I'll start with why he did it. Apparently, it all started from the suggestion of another blackface comedian. It supposedly gave Al a new sense of freedom and confidence on stage, because it's revealed that Al was actually quite a nervous and insecure person. There's also talk of Jolson's blackface being a metaphor for mutual suffering. You see, blacks and Jews were both discriminated in time. When blackface performers sing happy songs about living in the new land, they put on blackface to keep in touch with the past, but the pain is removed when hidden behind the mask, if that makes any sense. Jolson himself was never described as a racist. Apparently, he even went so far as to fight against black discrimination on Broadway. With blackface on, he never stooped to any stereotypes to my knowledge. He just performed. Now, I know Al was a stage performer, but there are 5 common depictions of African Americans in film. Some are okay, some are good, and then some are just really, really bad. But I think Al's depiction of an African American was better than the established 5. This isn't documented, this is just my interpretation, so hear me out. You see, in these depictions, African Americans seem oppressed by a society, preventing them from being on the same level as whites, or superiors preventing them from being free. But as stated already, when Al puts on blackface, he's given this new sense of confidence in performing on a large, open, and free space. You see, if anything, he's the most free, expressive, and eccentric black man that white people at the time would have known. Even his Gus character is described as an African-American underdog who outsmarts his enemies while exchanging wisecracks with the audience. A hero, in a way. Jolson was said to have introduced African-American innovations such as jazz and blues to white audiences, and because of this new acceptance to jazz and blues, it became a moment where part of black culture became part of American culture. Jolson's influence was very beneficial to the black community. A new generation of African-American performers emerged after Jolson. Even some emerging black performers such as Jackie Wilson used Jolson as a direct influence in their lives. And there was plenty of African-American performers who attended his funeral as well. Well, more than performers, just plenty of African-American people who were in the entertainment industry in general. Back then, he was remembered as a hero. But of course, now, he's only remembered for his blackface. The man was honored with not only a theater named after him, but also a street and a statue. I'm not going to say where they are exactly, just in case there's some extreme activists watching. I don't expect everyone to agree with everything said in this video, especially when I know that there's people who make online reviews of the jazz singer, but they apply their modern standards to their review and disregard the historical context. But there's also one other thing that carries on his legacy, and I am so shocked that this is still around. Tribute acts. Yep, some guy in the world has the balls to do a tribute act to Al Jolson in this day and age. This guy I'm showing right now, I'm not going to say his name or anything because I don't want people to go after him, but he did this for 37 years before quitting in 2015. And of course, all that time, he has had some flack, to say the least. Hilariously enough, that same year, 2015, he planned to perform in Baltimore, and a few months prior, riots occurred over the death of African-American Freddie Gray, who was killed by police. He wanted to perform as a fundraiser for the officers, and ironically, this guy was a former officer himself. Maybe one day, people will look back on Al Jolson for his achievements instead of what he wore. I mean, he's currently just buried in history. I mean, at least he's not getting cancelled on Twitter. I don't know, maybe he should remain buried. But one thing is certain. African-American music became part of American culture thanks to Al Jolson. A new generation of successful black performers emerged thanks to Al Jolson. And despite what he wore, he was never described as a racist. Remember that. If you want to learn a little bit more about him, I'll put like a YouTube card somewhere up there, and it's just going to be another link to another more detailed video about his life. And with that being said, I'm out of here.
Mammy, I'm coming. I hope I didn't make you wait. Mammy, I'm coming. Oh, God, I hope I'm not late. Mammy, don't you know me? It's a little baby. I'd walk a million miles for one of your smiles. Oh, my, me.